Good evening, friends. And I have with me today the Governor of Ekiti State and the Chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum, His Excellency Kayode Fayemi. Dr. Fayemi, it's good to have you with us. Good afternoon.
It's good to be with you, Ibn.
And how are you surviving the isolation and the sit-at-home issue, and all of that? How are you surviving it?
Well, I seem to be coping all right. 10 days gone, 4 days to go.
Okay.
I should be out of isolation by Monday, I reckon. And it's been actually quite nice. It takes me back to my days of loving my own company. I've been reading a lot. I've been teleconferencing a lot. I've discovering more and more the beauty of technology in a knowledge economy. And I think it's going to help us to press the reset button. When all this is over, we're going to work differently from the way we used to work. I've held 2 governors forums, teleconference of about 30 governors.
Wow.
And I asked myself, why do we go to Abuja just for 2-hour meeting when we could sit in our various states without the risk of accidents, the resources expended on that. And we're going to have to cut a lot of clothes according to our cloth in this post-COVID experience. So it's been good. And if you were to ask my wife also, I'm sure she's delighted that I'm around a lot these days.
That's it. There's a lot of upsides to it. I mean, we're not saying that we want COVID to be here for a long time, but like you said, it's helping us reset, press the reset button. It's helping us review our engagements and actually how we operate as a people, as individuals, as a world, and as a country. Now, you said something about managing and resetting. And the WHO has actually talked about this. It's looking at us and it's saying to everybody that COVID has done something. It's caused us to think again about our policies, about the kind of things we do, about what we have committed to our various sectors. As governor, looking at COVID and looking at the challenges you're facing in Ekiti State, and we will talk about that. What are some of the initiatives that we might begin to look forward to starting from now and post-COVID with regards to the health sector and the environment?
Frankly, I think it's just going to make us ramp up our focus on primary health. We've always been strong on primary health care in Ekiti, whilst tertiary health is important to us, and secondary health is also critical. We've always felt that prevention is what we need to focus on. And if there's one thing that COVID-19 has brought out, it's the importance of personal hygiene, it's the importance of sanitation, it's the importance of environmental cleanliness, in addition to several other things. Because this is not it's a lifestyle disease in a sense, but it's not a lifestyle disease in the manner of diabetes or cardiac challenges, hypertension, cancer, and all of that. It's more to deal with communicable diseases, and maybe this is a much more unique one, but we've had several in this light: cholera, Ebola, and now COVID-19, the usual flu that we deal with all the time. It's something about caring for our environment, taking our personal hygiene seriously, and also working on primary health because this is, above all, what this has exposed in our state. And for me, the lesson is that we need to do more on infectious diseases, on our primary healthcare facilities, on equipping our health workers, and also redirecting our health financing to primary health.
Yes. Your Excellency, one of the things that the World Health Organization has talked about is the fact that there are 3 billion people without access to potable water. And that, I'm sure, includes people in Ekiti State. One of the things that has come out from COVID-19 is everybody saying, wash your hands, hand washing. How do people in far-flung rural communities deal with this matter, especially when we're saying 3 billion people in the world do not have access to potable water? What are some of the initiatives you're going to be putting in place to address that? And whilst you're talking to me about that, is that a matter that has come under consideration at the NGF amongst your colleagues?
For me, from day one, water has been on our own agenda in Ekiti. In my first term, I spent a great deal of time on looking for resources to resuscitate our water dams, and luckily, we were able to get some resources, both from the World Bank and the European Union, to do turnaround maintenance of all the dams in our state. And as I speak to you, anyone in Ekiti can confirm to you the fact that pipes are being laid, our water facilities are being resuscitated, and water would be available from taps, not just water from borehole. We are re-engineering the entire water system in our state. And because we recognize that this is key. We can't be talking about wash your hands with running water, with soap and this, and then there's no water. So we're already focused on that. And I'm glad that you asked that question.
I'm going to ask you pointedly, Your Excellency, how much have you spent in terms of providing water to the rural poor?
Actually, we've spent close to the project we have on both sides, European Union, World Bank. It's close to $70 million that we've spent on providing water in our states. Because this is not just, and that's leaving aside boreholes that people put in place. My local government, some of them put up boreholes. In some specific rural communities, we also use boreholes as stopgap measures because the pipes cannot be laid in every part of our state, let's face it. Even if that's our vision, we're not there yet. So it may even be closer to $100 million. And the maintenance is also important. So we decided to set up a maintenance that gives ownership to the communities themselves to drive the protection of the water rather than a top-down framework.
Great, because I was going to come to that to talk about the issues of sustainability, because when it comes to provision of water, sustainability is a big issue. Someone asks a question on Facebook and they're saying to ask you, how are governors, and specifically speaking from your perspective, taking care of the poor and the vulnerable persons in this wake of COVID-19? How are governors?
I missed that.
Okay, sorry. I said someone asked on Facebook. They said, how are governors, and specifically yourself as governor of Ekiti State, taking care of the poor and vulnerable persons in your state?
Well, thank you very much. You know, you cannot talk about this COVID-19 without looking at the measures put in place for social protection and social intervention. You may be aware that in Ekiti, we've always had social intervention initiatives around our elderly population, our young population, around our pregnant women, and the people with disability. What we've just done, and over this weekend, we are distributing foodstuff
okay.
To about 30,000 households in Ekiti.
Okay.
That's quite a chunk of our households.
Okay.
Just to help them tide over this period. We cannot be asking people to sit at home and at the same time not provide them with some support system that would enable them to at least meet the demands of this period.
Yeah.
We have also made sure that for those who are in civil or public service, that they've received their salaries for March as at March 25th,
okay.
so that they can also buy foodstuff in bulk and keep that. We are also part of the conditional cash transfer scheme of the federal government, even though that is not in Ekiti yet, but I know that some of our people will benefit from that because they're already on the social register of the poor and the vulnerable members of the population. But you know, we see this as a long-term thing. No one knows when COVID will be over.
Yeah.
So we're not just preparing and working on crisis mode now, where we have full or partial lockdown.
Yeah.
We're also looking at what happens in the immediate aftermath of the crisis.
Yes.
How do we ensure recovery? What are the humanitarian and cash transfer safety nets we want to put in place? Livelihoods, micro-enterprise support that we need to put in place in the immediate aftermath of the crisis. And three, how do we stabilize going forward? So we are reorganizing our budget to take into account the challenges of the moment. Yes. We're setting up a stabilization fund for future. We are also looking at how we can partner with our development partners. I spent the early part of this morning talking to the
Hello, Governor? Hello, I'm losing you. I'm losing you. Hello. Oh dear. Hello? Yes, you're back on. Hello?
Sorry, I didn't know how much. Hello,
yes,
Ibim, I can hear you.
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah,
so I was saying that I spent the earlier part of today talking to the World Bank on the kinds of support they can render to us in the area of social protection, and arguing that they must do this across the 36 states and the FCT. For example, what would it cost us to maybe adopt 200,000 households that we give 5,000 naira at the very minimum for the next 18 months to deal with the aftermath of COVID. That's not a great deal of money. That would be roughly $50 million per state, $1.8 billion in the entire country, dedicated to that alone. And I don't think that's a huge amount of money. So those are the kinds of steps that we're discussing and that we're taking, both at the local level and as governors across the country.
Yes. Well, I would say that this is a bit comforting to hear. But something that WHO has said is that the UK got into trouble because it wasn't testing. And for a long time, the figures, the statistics are showing us one case from Ekiti State, one case from River State, one case, and yada yada. And the question on everybody's lips is testing actually going up? And what are you doing as governors, and you specifically as governor of Ekiti State, to ensure that there's a lot more testing? Because the UK ran into trouble because it wasn't testing enough. Are we testing enough?
Well, the challenge is the same that we are also dealing with. We don't believe that enough testing is taking place. Even the Center for Disease Control has admitted that they are not testing enough. There are only 6 testing centers fully functioning in the country right now. We have pushed the Minister of Health, we've pushed the Center for Disease Control to expand this, and they've given us assurance that they would open more testing centers, maybe about 3 or 4 testing centers in Abakaliki, in Ibadan, in Maiduguri, and Kaduna. So we're hoping that that would happen, but that would only still take it to 10 testing centers. So we've pushed again, and now the minister has come back to governors to say, okay, we're looking at the possibility of converting your TB testing centers, that's tuberculosis testing centers, which is in every state.
Yes.
To coronavirus testing centers. If they're able to do that conversion, that means testing can take place in every single state. But one of the key things we're putting before those who are keen to support this exercise is that we would like them to set up molecular laboratories in every state. And also, we've pushed NCDC to engage private laboratories that have the capacity to do this. And we know there are a number of private laboratories out there in Nigeria. Mekio is there, Synlab is there, amongst many others, and we may need to engage them in order to ramp up testing. The last figure that I saw was 2,000 tests have been done since this whole exercise started. I mean, I have tested, and it took me, even as governor, 3 days to get my test results. And you can imagine the panic and the concern in my state amongst people who had encountered me in the period before I got my results and the period leading to when I met colleagues who were positive. What must have gone on in their mind. So I think you're right, and I think we need to do a lot more on testing, because that's the only way we can really know the number of people who have caught this. COVID-19 is real, there's no question about it, but this is not just about COVID-19. It's also about our preparedness for emergency, for pandemics. And there are 2 pandemics we're dealing with. You know, for me, we're dealing with a health pandemic. That would one day come to an end. And then the real pandemic, the financial anxiety pandemic, will come on stream. And we really need to be thinking a lot more along the lines of how do we tackle this? Our oil is on the high seas, nobody is buying. Cargoes upon cargoes of Nigerian oil is on high seas. And yet we're here. This is what we depend on most as citizens. What are we going to do? But there is also an opportunity in that adversity. This is the time to press the reset button and forget about oil. Let's start looking at other non-oil vehicles that can lead to transformation, genuine transformation in our country. Agriculture, information technology, innovation, education, you name it. There's so many things that we could be doing, that we could be putting our talents to using, that we may not be ramping up enough. And this is the time to do that. So COVID has bad sides and good sides.
So, Your Excellency, I'm going to throw that right back on your table. There are those who are going to say, hey, your governor, hey, you were in the APC, hey, you promised us El Dorado. This is us, 6 years after. We think that by now you should have diversified the economy. What are you doing in Ekiti State? What are your colleagues doing? How much diversification of this economy has your party, the APC, been able to get done? And again, you know, it's important to tell us what's happening from your state so that we know that you're pointing fingers properly.
Actually, there is quite a chunk of diversification taking place. Oil no longer occupies that huge chunk of our GDP. Oil is just about 10% of our GDP. It's just that it is the chunk of our revenue. That's the problem. Agriculture is still the chunk of our GDP. We just need to make sure that we're making money from agriculture. we're turning it into agribusiness. And that's the area that we haven't quite succeeded in doing enough. But it's beginning to pick up. We see what is happening on the rice side. We see what is happening in the cassava belt. We see what is happening in the oil palm belt and the cocoa belt, but we need to do more. I mean, in my state, we have about 3 private institutions that are setting up rice mills. Stallion, Dangote, JMK. We have a similar number of institutions setting up cassava mills. We are engaging Promasido, who is helping us to revive our dairy milk factory of old. We are working with our farmers, organizing them in a way that an outgrower scheme that benefits ordinary farmers is put in place to support them and to ensure that they supply some of these processing factories that are coming on stream in our state, because we're known primarily for 2 things. We are agrarian and we're the state of education in Nigeria. So those are the things we want to push. Those are the things we are pushing.
Your Excellency, you know, there is a big issue, and you did allude to it, but I'm coming back to that. And that's the fact that because of COVID-19, humanitarian operations across the world are being affected. And I'm talking to you because I know you understand this. This is something you were very much involved in. And we're finding people moving their staff and recalling their staff all across the world. And the fear is the kind of huge humanitarian problems that will affect us even now. I mean, with 40 million internally displaced persons across the world, with over 25 million refugees looking for where to go, with the number of problems, even here in Nigeria, thinking about the Northeast, what is it? What are you looking at, yourself and your colleagues and the APC government? How are you trying to provide cushions? Because these persons who have been here supporting us might be going. And so what are we doing ourselves to ensure that we take care of this crisis? Because it's about to happen.
Well, you know, Ibim, I talked earlier about 3 things that we need to do and that we've started doing. One is relief for current challenges. The more longer term is recovery and then resilience. But the truth of the matter, and maybe in a lighter mood, is that COVID-19 is an equal opportunities virus. It's not just us. It's in the place they want to rush back to. So Nigeria may even be a better place to be for them. Now people are desperate to come to Nigeria rather than going the other way around. So maybe this time around the migration is reversed or may end up being reversed because our situation would appear better. Maybe some people have been talking about the first wave being Asia, the second wave being Europe, and now we might be the third wave. I honestly don't believe that, but I don't want us to be complacent. I think I was talking to a colleague from one of the prominent development bilaterals today, and I was asking that, look, what's wrong with you? Why are you guys missing in action? We've been discussing COVID-19 and trying to deal with all these challenges. I haven't had anything from your institution that used to be quick on the take before. And she said to me, we're spending more of our time on preparing our exit strategy, how to evacuate our workers from Nigeria to the country where they're from. And I said, this is utterly irresponsible on your part. I mean, this is why you are here. So just to back up your point that many of them are focused on evacuation. And you ask yourself, where are you evacuating to? The situation there is far worse than ours. Maybe you are more technically prepared in terms of your health facilities, but it has not absolved you from the challenges of COVID-19. So for us, we have to be the architect of our own fortune. We have to reorganize and rearrange ourselves in a manner that will provide us some cushioning effect. I think complacency is out. We should really create an awareness amongst our population that this thing is not a big man's disease. It's not a rich man's disease. It is because a rich man has a driver, he has a megad, he has all these ordinary people around him that he could easily infect. And everybody needs to raise their own consciousness level about it and then take the necessary steps. So there is personal responsibility over and above whatever government can do on this. Governors will try their best, but governors are human beings. Yes, you've elected us into office to ensure your security and welfare. And this is one critical aspect of that, security and welfare. But you also have to help yourself. I'm sorry I have to put it in that blunt manner, but we have to emphasize personal responsibility in this challenge that we face.
So someone on Facebook says I should ask you, why can't governors buy ventilators and test kits for their states?
Well, you know, the reality is that governors have competing needs, and there are ventilators in states. The truth of the matter is that out of the 174 COVID patients that are in the country today, to the best of my knowledge, and I think I have enough information to speak authoritatively on this, I am aware that it's only one of them that has required the use of a ventilator because of breathing challenges. So why are we buying ventilators if most of the people that we need to save are really not in need of ventilators? Ventilators really is the end of the road. It's not the beginning. Many of them just need to be put in a position of stability and stabilization and then recovery. And many of the people that have recovered, that have been discharged, the one in my state, I can speak authoritatively about that, never had any need for a ventilator. And never ran temperature, never had any of the symptoms. And by the time he was coming to the end of his isolation, he was tested twice and it was negative. And this is the story across the board. I'm not saying we shouldn't get ventilators, but maybe we need a much more creative approach of having a ventilator bank, if you like. And then we move ventilators around to where they are needed, rather than talking about needing 40,000 or a ventilator costs $16,000. One. I know how many primary health centers I can fix for that.
Well, Your Excellency, there is the other one, HungerVid-19, HungerVid-20, because we're in 2020. And people are saying, you're asking us to stay at home. We're a largely informal economy. We're an economy where if as an akara seller, I do not put out my basin, I cannot feed. I've heard the things you're saying about reaching out to these 30,000 households. But there are those who would say that is a knee-jerk solution. That is a solution. How sustainable is that? And if this continues, are we going to continue to stay at home? Will we continue to witness this partial or total lockdowns? How will our economy survive it? So looking forward and holistically, people are saying, can't we think of other things that will enable people still go out and earn a living whilst dealing with COVID-19? How do you respond to this?
I think it's a legitimate concern on the part of those who have raised that. But every literature, every information that I have seen and read on this pandemic says to us it's better to take an extreme shock therapy in order to do away with it. It took us a bit of time to come around to shutting our borders externally. Now that we've done that, at least we know that nothing is coming in unless they're coming in via the land borders, just as the Nigerians in Cote d'Ivoire who have now come with COVID to Osun State.
Yeah.
And if you know the history of Osun State, particularly the community known as the Jigbo there, you know that half of them are Ivorians. They've settled there for several years and they come back and forth between the two places. So now the state has had to deal with that because the land border was not closed before they got in. So there's a legitimate issue being raised.
Yes.
What we've done as a half measure, and I wouldn't say it is a full measure, there's partial lockdown of our informal sector. So provided whatever you are selling in front of your house, nobody is going to disturb you.
Okay.
That's one of the measures we've had to resort to. So you can still sell your akara in front of your house without impairing our social distancing plan. Rather than when you are in the market, where people pay scant regard to this thing and they really do not care. The grinding of bodies and the backslapping of each other, these are the things we want to avoid during this period. And that's the very thing that happens in these places. So we do not have a choice than to be hard on our people in order to protect them. I guess the best way you can put it is tough love.
Tough love.
Really. And it's tough love for our people.
And whilst we're having tough love, Your Excellency, what are we doing about communication? This is your strength. And there are those who say, hello, this story is not getting to the critical areas it should get to. At the grassroots, among those who need to know, they're not understanding this whole conversation about social distancing and hand washing. We're not telling the story. We're not breaking it down. This is your area of strength. And I'm wondering, what is really going on? Do you think communication is sufficient? If it isn't, what are you doing also as chair of the Governors Forum to help your colleagues in this regard? Because it's your area of strength.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge. I'm not even so sure I would say it's my area of strength now too. I don't know anymore. But really, we are a hugging people. We're a lovey-dovey people, joy de pouvoir. You know, it's very difficult to tell a Nigerian not to backslap, not to greet each other with enthusiasm and high-fiving and all that. So we have a challenge of communicating that. And as much as we try to do it through the normal channels that we utilize, through the informal channels that are out there, it's going to take a while because of one problem. Very few people know anyone who has died from COVID-19 in Nigeria. Unlike Italy, unlike United States, unlike Europe and China. I've tried to ask a few people, do you know anyone who has even been detained in an isolation center? They don't know. And it makes the story difficult to convey. So no matter how much we try to communicate it, people live by what they can see. We're a very visual people.
Yes.
They want examples. Who? I don't know any Okada rider who has been found to be infected by COVID-19. No, this is your big man's disease. It's not meant for us. It cannot take us. The apple that we eat will kill it even before it gets to us. You know the mentality of our people.
Or the akpeteshi that we drink.
Exactly. Or the akpeteshi will just obliterate it even before it gets the opportunity to survive on our body.
Well, Your Excellency, it's been good speaking with you, but one major concern of many Nigerians is that only the big men have access to testing. only the big men have access to isolation. Me, simple, ordinary me, frying my akara. Even if I have a cough and I get to the hospital, who is going to talk to me? They're probably going to tell me, Madam, just go home and isolate. I don't understand what that means. How are we ensuring that the vulnerable and the really poor have access to testing?
That's why I just said to you that we have been in conversation with the Ministry of Health, with the Director General of the Center for Disease Control, with the Presidential Task Force on this. And we've been going back and forth on the WHO mantra, testing, testing, testing. And they seem to understand it. They're the professionals. We're not health professionals.
Yes.
We just know that if you have 2,000 tests, as we've been told yesterday, and out of the 2,000 tests, 174 is positive.
Yeah.
That's close to 10%.
Absolutely.
That is close to 10%.
And it's scary.
Infection in our country. That's mega. If you extrapolate that to the 200 million that we are purportedly said to be, then there's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
That means we have 20 million people with COVID-19 infection. I mean, I don't want to scare you, Ibi, man. I don't want to scare myself. Yeah. I'm just doing statistical extrapolation. Exactly. It need not necessarily follow. But that's the reason why we must popularize testing. Unfortunately, NCDC has totally objected to these rapid testing kits. They consider them to be if you like, a sham, something that people just use to manipulate in periods of need, because Dr. Ihekwezu insists that this is not a malaria testing kit. It's not a pregnancy testing kit or an HIV testing kit that you can get the result in 10 minutes or 1 hour. You have to do a molecular testing, which is very accurate. And molecular testing, unfortunately, takes, I mean, mine took 72 hours. I hear they're trying to reduce it. 72 hours is a long time. And I agree, we need to do something about that. We do need to do something about that. I hope the TB conversion test will work and all our states would have the facility to test for COVID-19.
So my last question, you did say something and it was music to my ears about trying to use all the other labs that we have across the country. How much progress have we made around that?
Well, I can't, on the top of my head, tell you that this is how far we've gone. We had our conference with the minister on Sunday, and he informed us that they are working on converting the TB test centers to the corona virus test facility. I believe they must be doing their best to accelerate this process.
But what about the private laboratories you talked about? People like
I also understand that they're talking to the private laboratories and they want to work with them. I know that we're also doing some work on even the drugs.
Okay.
Everybody has heard the story of chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine. All of us grew up on the Sunday diet.
Yes.
Of chloroquine when we were growing up. Anyone who is in his 60s or 50s or 40s, they know more about chloroquine than what they use for malaria these days, which I don't even understand. But so for us, if indeed chloroquine works the way the University of Minnesota study has proven, or the way the Chinese study has proven it to be an effective prophylactic for this, then it makes sense for us to begin to stock chloroquine. And we're talking to some manufacturers already to do that.
Or perhaps to go into the bush and pluck all the dogoyaro we can find and go back into the labs and extract the quinine in it.
That would also not be a bad idea. That's local content.
Your Excellency, Dr. Fayemi, it's been a great pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much. And I'm sure we'll come back to you if we have more questions. We hope that you keep doing the good that you're doing and get your colleagues to do the same. For those of us who are the vulnerable poor, and don't laugh, we're waiting for your palliatives.
You are not on our social register.
Don't say that, oh. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.